Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. My guest today is Bond, James Bond. This James Bond isn't into international espionage. He's created a brilliant book about communications. His book, Brain Glue, breaks down the art of creating marketing that sticks in your mind. James's stories are legendary, his insights remarkable, and he shares his tales with us today. How did he come to write such a book? By way of a bump in the road, of course. James, welcome to Bump in the Road. If you would, tell us your story.
Well, I live in Southern California. I've been here for about 35 years, but I'm originally from Montreal. And in Montreal, I had an advertising agency. I worked my way up and had an advertising agency. And eventually we won major clients like Kraft Foods, Timex, Abbott Laboratories, Seagram's, their world headquarters is there. And so I thought, wow, I'm doing really well. And so I had an opportunity to win the anti-drug campaign in America. And then we lost, and we had actually this profound logical reasons why you should not do drugs. Logic is very important for me to say here, because then I saw the ad that won. It was a guy holding an egg saying, "This is your brain." And he cracked the shell and dropped the egg into a sizzling frying pan. "This is your brain on drugs. Any questions?" When I saw that ad, two things happened. First is I knew it was a gazillion times better than anything I did or knew how to do. And second, which is what terrified me, is I realized this is emotional selling. This is totally different from what I have no clue how to do emotional selling. It's profound in how it affects people, but I've never learned this. I don't know how to do this. I'm a logical person, and emotional interaction is like really powerful. And suddenly I became terrified of, did I pick the wrong profession? I'm in advertising and marketing. I mean, even in life. And I don't understand emotional selling, which is, if you see a movie that you love, it's easy to say, you don't say, well, it started this way, it's 42 minutes long. No, you say, whoa, I love this. This happened and that happened and everything else. And so I suddenly realized I have no idea how to do this emotional selling. And emotional selling, I'm in a selling career, advertising, it's critical. But what I did was I started, I came up with first I realized they don't teach it in school. And I went to the library and they just have superficial things. And I realized, well, maybe I can create a passion box. Maybe I can teach myself emotional selling, or at least figure out. And so I created a box. I put it right next to my computer. And on a 3x5 card, I wrote "Your Brain on Drugs," so I'd remember the ad. And I put it in my box. And I've been doing this to let you know, for over 35 years, I've been holding my passion box. You can imagine how big it is. It's loaded. In fact, sometimes we go to a doctor's office, and my wife hated going to doctor's offices with me because I'd be going through a magazine that I'd never seen before. I go, "Oh, wow, this is great." And she'd go, "Do not tear it out of the magazine." I said, No, this is amazing. I got to tear it out. And she would sit as far away from me as possible. So she would go like, "I do not know that guy," But I decided I was going to put them in the passion box every time I came across something that was profound, including phrases like President John F. Kennedy said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country." Malcolm X, a civil rights activist, and I was, I'm old enough to remember growing up during that era, and Malcolm X said, "We didn't land on Plymouth Rock, the rock landed on us." And these were profound concepts, and I sort of felt in my brain, there's a formula to it, but I don't know what the formula is. Today I know it's called chiasmus, and I describe it in my book, Brain Glue. But I would put them in my box. I would say, "Wow, this is profound." And I put them in my box. And but I would not overanalyze them, because I knew that I can't overanalyze it. I don't understand what I'm doing. All I know is emotionally it's affecting me. Well, eventually, I met John Gray when we moved to California, and John Gray wrote this fantastic book, one of the best relationship books ever, and he called it Men, Women, and Relationships. And he was telling me he was frustrated because people would read it and would just be blown away, like this is the best book we've ever read about relationships, etc. And he only sold like a few thousand copies. And so he was he was in an audience. He was promoting his book to a group of people, and he said something, and all the women started laughing. He was telling me this, and all the women started laughing, and all the men looked at the women and went, "What's so funny that he just said?" And then he started saying, "See, it's interesting. Look, there are some things that women laugh at and men don't laugh at. I'm sure there are some things that men laugh at that women don't laugh at, and I'm sure there are things that we all laugh at." And one of the women said, from the audience, "It's almost like men are from a different planet." Everybody started laughing. He said, "I guess men are from Mars." And the whole audience started laughing. When he got home, he said, "Okay, if men are from Mars, that's interesting. And where are women from? I guess women are from Venus. Venus is the god of love." And then he got this crazy idea. He was telling me, what if I change the title of my book from Men, Women, and Relationships to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus? And I'll do references to Men Are From Mars, Women Are From Venus throughout the book, but it'll be basically the same book. What do you think happened? He was telling me. Out of the blue, almost overnight, 500,000 people bought his book, then 1 million, then 2 million, then 10 million. Eventually, he's already sold more than 50 million copies of his book. 50 million, all because he changed the title. When I got home, it freaked me out. I went like, what? This is too important. This is the trigger point where I've got to take my passion box, dump it on my bed, and see if I can understand the patterns. And I said, well, the first pattern was his was a metaphor. I mean, men aren't really from a different planet. At least I don't think we are. Okay, maybe we are, but I don't think we are. But metaphors, are there other things that use metaphors? And I out of all the things I had on my bed, I went, oh, well, wait a second. Look, the TV show Shark Tank is not a tank full of sharks. I mean, it might feel like it when you're on the show, but it's not. It's a bunch of investors. But if they called it the Investors Club, do you think it would be as successful as Shark Tank? No, I don't think so. And so an analogy or metaphors are really powerful. And then I realized I was watching on Discovery Channel the show talking about the biography of Dreyer's ice cream and how they came up during the Great Depression. And during the Great Depression, and so back then they had 3 types of ice cream: chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. And they decided let's create chocolate ice cream and put nuts in it and marshmallows. And instead of calling it a conventional name, what should we call it? Well, it's kind of bumpy, like a Rocky Road. Let's call it Rocky Road ice cream. Because they came up with the name Rocky Road ice cream, sales exploded. And I started realizing, like, wow. But Rocky Road ice cream also uses, besides a metaphor, it uses alliteration, a repetition of sound. Rocky Road. And I went, oh, wow, I wonder if that's another brain trigger. And that helps with emotional selling. And so I started thinking about it and doing some research. I went, wow, think of all the things that use alliteration. Coca-Cola, Best Buy, PayPal, TikTok. And my mind started exploding because I went like, these are patterns that apply to, I'm a baby boomer, They call it terrible twos. How about trick or treat? I mean, I started realizing that these things stick to the brain like glue. And that's where I went from this transition from left brain thinking to right brain thinking, emotional thinking. Like, what are the emotional triggers that stick to the brain like glue? So I could understand how emotional selling works. And, the bump in the road for me was going from logic to emotion, okay? Understanding the emotion side. I mean, we're driven by emotion, but I grew up even in school where teachers would say to me, it's like math. What's the logic? If you want to explain something, you have to explain the logic of it. But in the research I've done since then, I learned there are 2 famous people. There's Gerald Saltman, who is a Harvard professor, and Daniel Kahneman, who is a Nobel Prize-winning psychologist. And they both discovered and demonstrate that more than 90% of all decisions are made when you trigger the right side of the emotion side of the brain. I mean, you can have some logic too, but you have to emotionally engage people. And I realized as I started going through this that brain triggers like analogies and metaphors, like alliteration, like humor, actually trigger parts of the brain that make people more receptive to what you're presenting. In fact, just the last thing on Rocky Road Ice Cream. Rocky Road Ice Cream was developed during the Great Depression. And during the Great Depression, it was a nickname for the Great Depression was the Rocky Road. We're all on a rocky road. So their concept was, since we're all on a rocky road anyway, we might as well have Rocky Road ice cream, which is kind of funny. But it blew my mind when I started seeing this. I mean, I didn't invent brain glue. I invented the words brain glue, the term brain glue. But people who understand passion and emotional selling, like you want to engage with people emotionally, have been doing this for a long time. I was talking about President John F. Kennedy. He did ask not what your country can do for you, ask what you can do for your country. Well, he loved this term called chiasmus. And I'll explain how that works in a second. And so he would come up with other phrases like that, like if you want, mankind must put an end to war, or war will put an end to mankind. As I was talking about Malcolm X, Malcolm X said, we didn't land on Plymouth Rock, the rock landed on us. He also said, when you stand for nothing, you'll fall for anything. Now, these are chiasmus, one of the other tools. And it was really, really powerful. And I started realizing, like, chiasmus is, we hear these terms all the time, but don't realize that this is actually a process. Winners never quit, and quitters never win. When the going gets tough, the tough get going. My wife hated the song from Crosby, Stills, and Nash. If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with. She said, no. Okay. Just Mae West, who was in the early days of the motion picture industry, loved chiasmus. It's a flip. She would say it's better to be looked over than overlooked as a woman. She said, women like a man with a past, but they prefer a man with a present. By the way, it's not present tense. It's a present, giving somebody a present. She said, when women go wrong, men go right after them. And she said, good girls go to heaven, bad girls go everywhere. She also had one that was, hopefully I'm not crossing a line on this, a hard man is good to find. She has there's a joke. For us old people, we can relate to this. It's better to wake up and pee than to pee and wake up. So it's just, suddenly I start realizing these patterns and I start recognizing them all over the place. And then I start teaching people this and they start coming back and saying like, wow, my life has changed. My product has changed if I'm selling products or services. And just one thing on this. This doesn't just apply to selling products and services. In the O.J. Simpson trial, his attorney, Johnny Cochran, used the power phrase of rhyme. If the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. He would tell the jury, because they found this glove that they believe was from the murderer of his wife and her friend. And so he told the jury, remember, if the gloves don't fit, you must acquit. And then OJ faked that it was really hard for him to put on the glove. And so I remember two of the jurors after the trial saying, somebody was, an interviewer was asking them, why did you with all the evidence against him, why did you let him go free? And one of the jurors said this while the other one was nodding her head in agreement. Well, we knew if the gloves don't fit, we have to acquit. The gloves didn't fit, so we had to acquit. It's, when we think of rhyme and we start looking at it, I mean, I'm old enough to remember, I hopefully a lot of people in the audience will remember this, is Jack and Jill went up the hill to fetch a pail of water. Little Bo Peep. I mean, we just, we remember rhymes, nursery rhymes, even if it's like 10, 20, 30, for mine, it was like 60 years ago. I remember that rhyme. On my deathbed, you could start the rhyme and say, Jack and Jill went up the hill too, and I'd finish it because it sticks to the brain. Rhyme sticks to the brain. And so the more I realized these things, the more I started researching these things, I started discovering all these profound emotional selling tools that help you engage with with the person you're talking to, or if you're advertising, the person you're advertising to, in a way that triggers the emotion sides of the brain. And it's just so powerful. And it's so I want to tell you this. So this woman says to me, and think how powerful, this is so powerful. I can get a guy off from a murder trial. Okay. That's how powerful this is. So this mom says to me, can you help me with my 14-year-old son? I mean, you're an expert in brain glue. I'm like, okay. I'm afraid what she's going to ask me. I'm terrified. But she says, my 14-year-old son says, Mommy, why do we have to follow so many rules in life? How do you answer that one? So using brain glue, I said, okay, well, let's start with rhyme. What rhymes with rules? How about fools? Only fools don't follow rules. There's a law. We can say that. Only fools don't follow rules. But let's use an analogy or a metaphor also to really strengthen this. And so I sat with her and we brainstormed a bit. And then I came up with this metaphor. So I sat with her and her son. And I said, her 14-year-old son, and I said, so you were asking your mom why we have to follow so many rules in life, right? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, when you're thirsty, you could drink water out of the toilet, but why would you want to? Remember, only fools don't follow rules. And then he looks at me and says, oh, that makes sense. First of all, when can you get a 14-year-old to say anything makes sense? That's a miracle, okay? So I decided to escape quickly before he asked me another question. But does it really make sense, or did I just trigger emotion sides of the brain so it felt like it makes sense? And that goes with, I can think of two political phrases, okay? The first one that follow the same process. The first one is, you can't hug a child with nuclear arms. You know, I mean, it doesn't really make sense, but it does, because hug a child, there's something called anchoring, or anchoring, hug a child, which makes you emotional, with nuclear arms, which is emotional, but it's a totally different emotion. And by anchoring those two things together, it's like, whoa. And here's another one. And I'm not for or against anti-gun control. I'm not talking about that at all. I'm just fascinated by brain glue, okay? But here's another one. I heard a comedian say, the right to bear arms is almost as crazy as the right to arm bears, okay? It's funny, but I've heard people say, interesting, you know? But it's taking, you know, it's using brain glue tools. It's triggering parts of the brain where people are going, interesting. And to me, it's fascinating because, because you have to connect. I learned this, you have to connect with the emotion centers of the brain. There's actually something called Hebb's law, which is, I'm talking about the brain's neurons, and it says neurons that fire together wire together, which means if you can get different parts of the brain wiring at the same time, then anytime you trigger one part of that brain, it will start triggering all the other parts, saying, oh, here it comes. And to me, it goes with like Shark Tank. You're not going to think it's a tank full of sharks. You kind of get used to the fact that it's a TV show, but still, or Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus, you know, your brain gets used to the fact that, okay, it's not just the words, men are not from Mars, women are not from Venus. I hope not, by the way. But it's a metaphor, and your brain triggers it to, oh, I get what he's saying, that men and women are different in different ways. And it triggers it because you get Hebb's law going. It triggers different parts of the brain. Then when you say it once and it affects the person, then every other time that you're going to say it, it will often affect the person in the same way. Sorry, I blab a lot, but
Oh
I
no,
love
I find this fascinating, and I know for a fact that this is true. You have to connect with that right side of the brain for everything else to kind of coalesce. One of my favorite examples, actually, in your book, was using the truth to sell.
So we have to remember, just because we say something that we know is true doesn't mean other people are going to understand it. Okay. So for me, one of my favorite things in the book is talking about this, because I can tell you, let's say I'll give you a fact. Okay. Americans discard 2.5 million plastic bottles every hour. And I'm saying that because I want you to understand, pollution is a terrible thing. But do you really understand what I said when I say Americans discard 2.5 million plastic bottles every hour? It's like, what if I add the phrase, that's enough to reach the moon every 3 weeks? Yikes.
That resonates.
Really? I mean, and we need perspective. That's one of the things we have to understand. I remember this, okay? I remember Zig Ziglar said this thing. I love this thing, okay? And please, nobody be offended until I tell you the punchline. And then if you get offended, well, I'll be floored, okay? But he said, take the words, I did not say he beat his wife. I'm counting the words, 8 words, okay? And we live in a time right now where texting and emails is dominant. We interact with each other by texting all the time. Well, so take these words. I did not say he beat his wife. And look at how many different ways this can be interpreted. I didn't say he beat his wife. Somebody might have said it, but it wasn't me. I didn't say he beat his wife. I might have implied it. I didn't say he beat his wife. And am I talking about tennis? I mean, is it possible that we could say something and somebody will get all mad at us because they misinterpreted what we were saying? So I teach for the U.S. Small Business Administration. So sometimes I'll have 200-300 people in the group. Sometimes it'll be a small group like 15 or 20 people. And I love doing this. And I do a lot of coaching because I'm trying to give back. And, I know so much about behavioral management. It's really relevant and powerful for people, and marketing and business. And so this woman comes up to me and she says, I love your workshops. You're awesome, but you scream and it drives me nuts. And I'm freaking out like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I scream all the time. She says, yeah, every time you send an email, it's all capital letters. Why do you scream when you send emails? I was like, what? Oh, I didn't realize that's what I thought you meant that when I'm doing my workshops, I'm screaming. No. When you send emails. Now, if I didn't clarify, if she just sent me an email back saying, you scream all the time and it drives me nuts, just like she said that, it like freaked me out. It's like, wow, I misunderstood what she was saying. And so we have to remember that it's too easy, especially in this day of text messaging and emails, that it's very easy for people to misunderstand us and then to get mad. And suddenly we go, like, how come you're mad? So, well, forget it, It's like, but what did I do? I'm not talking to you anymore. I have my younger brother, I sort of went through that with him. And I can never figure out, like, what did I say? So, yeah, just what a world we live in.
That's kind of interesting, though, in that it's easier than ever to reach larger audiences, but harder than ever to catch their attention.
Oh, absolutely. And that's why brain glue is so important. I mean, I think of Head and Shoulders shampoo. Gee, I wonder where they got the name Head and Shoulders from. Maybe Head and Shoulders, knees and toes, eyes, ears, mouth, and nose. Virtually every kid knew that back then. I hopefully still do, as far as, for a little kids game that we played. And so Procter & Gamble figured, so since everybody knows Head and Shoulders, knees and toes, eyes, ears, mouth, and nose, why don't we use the name Head and Shoulders for our shampoo? And the rest, as they say, is history. Okay? And there's just a lot of those types of things where I didn't know this, that Holiday Inns was started by this guy, Kemmons Wilson. And the movie Holiday Inn, starring Bing Crosby and Fred Astaire, was hugely popular back then. So he figured, since I'm starting a hotel, why don't I call it Head and Shoulders? Yeah, the Head and Shoulders Hotel. No, we won't call it that. Why don't I call it Holiday Inn? And again, the rest, as they say, is history, because he picked something that's that's resonates. So I saw on the TV show Shark Tank, Wally Amos, who did Famous Amos Cookies. And it was really a sad interview that he had, because he was talking about how he sold Famous Amos for $1 million to these people because he needed the money. And they sold it to, I don't know, Pillsbury or somebody for like $30 or $40 million. He made a fortune. $1 million is a lot of money, but over time, I guess, he used it up. But he sold the rights to his name and his picture. So he couldn't use his picture and his name. And so he was talking to the people on Shark Tank, and he said, here's a new product I have, but I can't use my name. It can't be called Famous Amos or anything like that. And I can't use my picture. And so they were kind of frustrated a little bit. They felt bad for him because they wanted to help him. He was Wally Amos, but they couldn't because there was like no hook. And so I was thinking of this after, and I said, I could apply brain glue easily to this one. So Wally Amos, Famous Amos. You can't use Famous Amos, okay? But his name is Wally. Why don't we come up with a product called Wally Balls? They're little cookies in the shape of little balls, Wally Balls. And we'll put a picture of the back of his head on the label, and with an arrow that says, I can't show you my face. Read the back to understand why. When you get to the back, it says, hi, my name is Wally Amos. I created a quote unquote famous product that you probably love. But because of that, I can't use my face. So, but I just want to let you know I'm still here. It's Wally Amos. Hi, okay, with Wally Balls. And because it would be if you would have done that on Shark Tank, they would have been lining up to invest in him because the hook grabs you. So I remember There was this mom and her son, and the mom was in the bathroom. Did I talk about this? Squatty potty.
No, no. You talk about it in your book, though.
Okay, well, it's amazing that the mom is in the bathroom on the toilet. Okay, and she uses a little stool to raise her feet. I don't want to get too detailed on this, but it changes the shape of your body when you raise your feet a little bit, and helps you, physiologically go to the bathroom. And so she and her son came up with the idea of coming up with this little toilet stool. And they're thinking, like, should we call it a toilet stool? No, that's not really going to work. Not really going to work. But using brain glue tools, even though she didn't know about brain glue yet, but she was using brain glue tools. And she said, well, let's think of, other word for toilet. We don't want to call it the toilet stool. It's called a potty. Oh, it's a potty. So potty is a nice term. And you kind of squat. It's like a squatty potty. Let's call it squatty potty. The name resonated so much. These people had the mom and her son had no business experience, but they started this product. They got a company to manufacture it for them. And within 2 years, in less than 2 years, they sold $100 million. $100 million worth of product. You think it's because of the name? They got on Shark Tank, and even the people in Shark Tank were lining up to invest in them because it's a cool name, Squatty Potty. I get it. Oh wow, and it explains what your product does. And so it's just when you realize things like that, if you can come up with a hook that connects to the mental, to the right side, the emotional side of the brain, it makes it easier, to get your child to talk to your child about certain things. It makes it easier to get released from a guilty verdict in a trial. It helps you sell products and services. It also helps you, in lots of different ways. So yeah, I mean, I'm a religious. I'm not deeply religious, but I'm pretty religious. And this guy was telling me how he told me this thing, and it was really, I think, quite profound. He said, "What do you say to an atheist?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." He said, "Do you hope you're wrong?" I said, "Do you hope you're wrong? Do you hope you're a freak of nature? You're living life for no apparent reason, and when you die, you turn to dust? Or do you hope there was something before this? You're here for a purpose, and when you die, you go to the next level?" And we're talking about that. We said what's powerful about that is because instead of fighting a person, you're engaging the person in a discussion. And I think that's one of the things, besides making people laugh, engaging people in discussion and conversation, I think really helps. And it certainly helps with brain glue, because brain glue has something that's called redintegration, not reintegration, but redintegration, which is the brain's need for completion. It's why, we watch crappy movies or TV shows to the end. I went into the living room and I said to my wife, "Hey, is this TV show any good?" She said, "No, it's stupid." So, "Well, why are you watching it?" She said, "I want to see how it turns out." Okay. It's like, oh, I've been there. But the most powerful tool of redintegration is questions, because when we hear a question, we want to do an answer, don't we? And so when we're engaging with somebody, when we do a question, and if we ask them a question, it tends to engage them more. Just if I can tell you this last story, but I think it's really powerful. So redintegration is the need for completion. There's another brain glue tool, and I don't talk about it a lot in the book because I did research, because I love brain glue. As I was doing the book, after I did the book, I went like, oh, wow, I didn't realize this. So redintegration gets us liking symmetry, okay? So my wife, it drives her nuts if some guy has a sagging eye, so you can cover up half of his face and he looks like one person, you cover up the other half, he looks very different. And that drives her nuts, okay? Because it's asymmetry. It's not balanced on the two sides of their face. So that brings me to the story of Marilyn Monroe that a lot of people don't know. So Marilyn Monroe was originally Norma Jean, and I think it was her manager said, "You should change your name to Marilyn." So she went, okay. And I think it's her stepfather named Monroe. So she had Marilyn Monroe, which is using alliteration, a repetition of sound, Marilyn Monroe, okay? But that wasn't it. And then her favorite actress was Jean Harlow back in the day, in the early days of the movie business. And Jean Harlow was a platinum blonde. So what Marilyn did was she went to the same hairdresser that Jean Harlow went to and had her hair colored the same color, platinum blonde. So she looked just like Jean Harlow. But Marilyn Monroe also had a beauty mark on her cheek, on her left cheek, and she'd cover it up with makeup, you know. But then one day she was looking at photos of Jean Harlow and she noticed something amazing. She said in some of the photographs, Jean Harlow had a beauty mark on her cheek, and on some of them, she had it on her chin. And then she went, wait a second. I bet she doesn't even have a beauty mark. I bet she's just putting a dot on her face to bring attention to herself. Asymmetry, you know? And so what she did from that point forward is she would take an eyeliner and she would darken, instead of hiding the beauty mark on her cheek, she would darken it. And she believed that it had a lot to do with her becoming a supermodel, super famous. And so another famous supermodel, Cindy Crawford, tells a story in Vogue magazine, I think it was, that I was reading it. And it was about, she has a birthmark above her lip, on her left side, I'm pretty sure. And she said when she was a kid, when she was young, she begged her mom, could you please get that beauty mark removed, or birthmark removed? And her mom wouldn't. And she says now, I am so glad my mom didn't get it removed, because I believe my beauty mark is a large part of why I became a supermodel. You know, it's like, wow. And what made me think of that was David Ogilvy, who was in the early days of advertising, did an ad for Hathaway shirts. So if you're doing a print ad for a magazine and about Hathaway, about a shirt, what would you do? You'd get a good-looking model wearing a shirt, nice pair of pants, probably in a nice location. So every shirt ad basically looks the same. But what he did was he put an eye patch on his model, and they had multiple models. So it wasn't just one guy who showed up with an eye patch. He put an eye patch on the model, which is asymmetry. And he called it the Hathaway, the man with the Hathaway shirt or something like that. But they would never explain why the eye patch was there. But people would be flipping through a magazine, and then you oh, here's a guy with an eye patch on, huh? And it attracted attention because of asymmetry, because this guy had an eye patch on. And so it's just like stuff like that was fascinating me, because it triggers something in the brain where you go like, oh, interesting.
Well, in the cases, all the cases you mentioned, you have very beautiful people by our standards, and they actually have very symmetric faces. And by, say, leaving the beauty mark or something, it almost destroys the symmetry, which is what catches your eye, don't you think?
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's wired into us. Asymmetry is wired into us from the early days of man, when you'd stand and you look at a field and you see everything there, and suddenly you see this. Did something just move? Did something just move? And you want to see that because you want to make sure it's not like some tiger that's going to attack you, or some villain or something like that. And so it's wired into us, and that's why we look at stuff that we're used to looking at, and then we wait a second. We see something that's a little different than what we're used to, and it gets our attention. And in fact, here's a joke that uses asymmetry. Okay, jokes work this way. Comedians love this, because if you say something that they're used to hearing, and then you twist the ending, they go like, whoa. And it's fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, congratulations. And it's like, wait a second. Okay, that's funny, So, yeah. Brain glue is so fascinating to me, because it's such a big part of how we interact with each other. It's just amazing.
It is amazing. And I found your book just so fascinating. One of the other things you mention in the book that I don't think you've touched on is tribal alignment.
Well, tribal alignment is very important. It's, we are members of tribes. We certainly see it with politics, okay? Pro-Trump or anti-Trump, okay? But I mean, it's lots of other things. It's like the school you went to, the city you live in. I'm from Montreal originally, and so I was hearing the song, When I Think About Those Days in Montreal. It's one of my favorite songs. Why? Because it's my tribe, okay? I mean, I live in Southern California now, so it's actually funny because I loved we moved to California about 35 years ago. We have a son and 3 daughters, and I named our middle daughter Lauren Asia, AJA, LA. So as soon as she was born, every time people would ask how long you've been in California, we'd think, how old is Lauren? Because as soon as she was born, we moved here. But her middle name is Asia, AJA. And I love, a lot of groups. I love Steely Dan. If, some of your people know who Steely Dan was. And so 2 years ago, my daughter said, I love the name Laura Asia, and people love the name Asia. It's really cool. She said, but I was always wondering, why did you name me Asia? Because it's kind of an unusual name. So I said, Well, we named it because of Steely Dan has the song and album Asia, and we just love that. And so she said, okay, great. And then she called me back about 15 minutes later and said, I listened to that song. That's horrible. And I said, sorry. As a parent, you name your child, you hope they love the name. But anyway, eventually she started liking the song. But it's just, it's part of the tribe that we're in. I have this guy. This guy who's like a very famous person, so I don't want to say who it was, but I wanted to interact with him and sort of do business with him and do some things with him. So I went to his LinkedIn page first, talked about very technical, what school he went to and everything else. Okay. But I checked Facebook and wow, he had a Facebook page. And on the Facebook page, it said that his daughter had just gotten married. So that was really a big thing. And it said that he was a Mormon. And so when I met with him, I said, oh, wow, I hear your daughter just got married. And he said, oh, how do you know that? I said, well, I saw it on Facebook. He said, oh, yeah, yeah. I said, well, I wrote the Father-Daughter Project. I started something called the Father-Daughter Project. I wrote a book called The Secret Life of Fathers. And I did it, to try to strengthen relationships between fathers and daughters. And we got into a really good conversation because that was his tribe. He's a father. He's a dad. We're both together. We're in the dad's tribe. And then I said, and you're a Mormon. What's that all about? And he started telling me about famous people who are Mormons, not Hilton Hotels. One of the big hotels is Mormon. The guy who wrote 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is a Mormon. And he starts telling me about that, and he's all proud. But it connected with him because I was asking him about things related to his tribe. So it's my son, because I work with the U.S. Small Business Administration, my son retired from the Navy. He retired at 40 years old. I mean, it's like, that's young. But he wanted to start a business. And so I said, so we've got 3 coaches that I could actually connect you to and get you to interact with. 2 of them are just regular coaches that were successful in business. And the third guy, he's pretty successful in business, but he's in the Navy. And my son was in the Navy. Which one do you think my son chose? The guy in the Navy, because it was part of his tribe. And so when we understand, what tribe people are part of or they relate to, it helps a lot for us to connect with them and interact with them and not say something that might be offensive to their tribe.
I think there's a lot of wisdom in this book that goes beyond selling. It goes to personal connection, that right brain connection. And if you were to set somebody up to really brainstorm, to come up with something that is brain glue, what 2 or 3 things would you tell them to focus on?
Okay, I'll give you 3 things. The first one is, like Squatty Potty, come up with words that relate to what you do or what your product, service, or idea is about, and then see if you can come up with alliterative words. Words that sound similar. Squatty Potty. Bed Bath and Beyond. Okay. The second thing is a metaphor. Come on, or an analogy. End this sentence. My product, service, or my idea is just like what? And be as crazy as possible. Come on, just stretch your idea, but what's it like? And the third thing, and I think this is probably the most important thing, is it's called simple reflexive questions. And this changed my life, absolutely changed my life. It changed my relationship with my wife, with my kids. It got me, it just changed my life. And simple reflexive questions work this way because questions are part of redintegration. It's like wired into us to answer. Isn't it, doesn't it, shouldn't it, don't you agree are simple reflexive questions, aren't they? Okay. It's a little question you put at the end of a statement. And let me give you some 2 simple examples. So I was talking to a friend and I said, what a beautiful day. Now, without a simple reflexive question, I would have said, what a beautiful day. Instead, I said, what a beautiful day, isn't it? And he said, yeah. Does that mean something's going on with him or not? I said, yeah, why? What's wrong? He said, oh, nothing. I said, no, what? Oh, it's not a big thing. So come on, what is it? He said, no, I'm just having problems with my daughter, and I don't know. I think she's going to drop out of school, and I don't know what to do with her. Oh, wow, really? And I got into a really nice discussion with him because I used my simple reflexive, because I wired my brain. I trained myself to add this on the end of different statements. And that works if you're selling. It works if you're talking to your child or your wife. I was teaching a friend this, And then he came back to me and he said, it's amazing. I came home and his wife is a stay-at-home mom. And I said, hey, how's it going? How was your day? And she said, okay. What does that mean? Does that mean, yes, it was a great day? Or does it mean something's going on? And he said, by asking, simple reflexive questions, by wiring myself to ask this, how's it going? And listening, it was amazing. He said, I want to watch a football game, but I forced myself not to. I learned this from Father-Daughter Project, by the way. We tend to shoot through things and solve problems instead of just listening. But he said, I sat there and I listened, and she started talking about something that was really deeply important and personal to me, to her. And it was really powerful. And to me, if you don't get anything out of this podcast right now, or simple reflexive questions, if you can add, isn't it, doesn't it, shouldn't it, don't you agree, to how you talk and speak, I believe it will change your life. It changed my life so much. I mean, my kids say, Dad, you're much more interactive now than you've ever been. And it's funny because they don't realize that I'm using it. My wife does. She knows, oh, he's using simple reflexive questions again, But they work. They work.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.